All right. Tonight's lesson in learning to read biblical Hebrew, we're going to look at the letters He, Vav, and Zion. And let me get back here to there we go. These are the, let's see, fifth, sixth, and seventh letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And these lessons are designed to help students recognize the letters visually, pronounce them correctly, understand their grammatical function, to learn historically grounded messages, primarily from Jewish and academic sources, with the lean toward academic. And also to see how Hebrew letters contribute depth and texture to the language of Scripture. So, an important foundation. Before we begin, it's important to understand how we are approaching the meanings of the Hebrew letters. Ancient Hebrew letters originally developed from pictographic forms, and I think Rabbi Jay has made a very good point that Joseph probably was a father of the writing of Hebrew, and he would have taken the pictographs of the Egyptian language and transformed them into letter depictions. Rather than depicting ideas, they depicted sounds, and then those sounds could be put together in a way that they could transfer their spoken language, excuse me, by writing it down. We get, if it wasn't Joseph, by all means, it was Moses. But I think by the time of Moses, it was already in a written form, where the language had primarily been an oral language before that. There are some good ideas that come from the rabbinic literature on the letters. Medieval commentators, scribal traditions, later mystical writings, although we'll not get into that a lot. But there's some insights into the letters that help us gain a deeper meaning of the Torah if we use them properly. However, some modern Hebrew roots and Messianic teachings make claims that cannot be historically verified. That doesn't mean necessarily that they're not true. They're just not accepted. Some of the ideas that are put out there, and believe me, there's so many on the internet that it boggles the mind. Many of these symbolic interpretations are devotional rather than linguistic. And I want to distinguish between the historical evidence, traditional interpretation, and later mystical reflection. So in these lessons, we're focusing primarily, not completely, but primarily on verifiable linguistic information. I think that should be our foundation. And then building on it, traditional Jewish sources, grammatical function, and literary and theological depth grounded in the scriptures, primarily the Tanakh. We may occasionally mention mystical or symbolic traditions, but we'll do so carefully, and hopefully I will do it responsibly. So I'm not going to write on the whiteboard. I put that in there for a note for myself, but we have already looked at the letters Aleph, Bet, and Vet, the Gimel, the Dalet, and tonight we'll be looking at the Hey, Vav, and the Zion, and reading from right to left as Hebrew is. So this progression is not strict doctrine. I've seen so many memes online that says this is what this means. Well, that might be what it means to you, and that's fine. But to say this is what it means is something different. It's a teaching framework that helps us as students to remember the letters and to reflect on patterns that's found in Hebrew thought. So we learned in our first lesson of the consonants that the aleph has the idea of source, strength, and beginning. The bet has the idea of a house or a dwelling, a tent. We go into the gimel, and it has the idea of movement or provision because the gimel historically was connected with the camel, which was the primary method of moving goods from one area to another. The letter Dalet is a door or pathway. And Hey has the idea of revelation or expression. We'll see later the symbol of the man with the upraised arms. The Vav has the idea of connection or joining, and we'll talk about that. I talk about that a little bit in my little video on the letter Vav and how to write it. The Zion has the idea of action or purpose. So, one possible conceptual flow is the source, a dwelling is formed, movement and provision begin, access and entry appear, revelation and breath emerge, things become connected, and purposeful actions follow. So we can see the progression of the letters of the alphabet actually kind of paint a picture for us. Now let's look at the letter Vav. The letter Vav in modern Hebrew pronunciation is pronounced as a V sound, a V. Many scholars believe, and we don't have tape recordings of this, so we can't say with 100% assuredness, but the older pronunciation is thought to survive in some Yemenite Jewish traditions with a W sound. I know some scholars online, and one is has a doctorate. He works on all kinds of Hebrew manuscripts, worked on the Dead Sea Scrolls. He knows what he's talking about. He always says, well, it's a B sound. It's not the W sound. The W sound comes from the German, like Werner von Braun, the W sound was not there. I shared with them that I think both existed. I think it was a matter of dialect, which tribe you were from. Can I prove that? Like I said, we don't have any tape recordings, or records or cassette tapes or anything of Moses speaking Hebrew. So I guess I'll just have to say that's my opinion for what it's worth. The Yemenites, today we would pronounce this Vav with the schwa under it. We would pronounce this as we, not a v. Or I'm sorry, we pronounce it today as a v. The Yemenites would pronounce it as a w. Or yikra instead of vayikra. And we pronounce it today as vav. In the Yemenite dialect, they pronounce it as wa. And sometimes this comes over into their grammar books when we think of the wa consecutive, which is a tool that Hebrew uses, the grammar uses to show a progression of time, like Wayikra, then he said, or and he said. The ancient form was a hook, a peg, and some would say a nail. And it looked like this in the earliest forms, and then it looked like that in the older forms. It didn't change much. So this fits extremely well with the grammatical role of Vav because the letter frequently connects ideas together. I bring out in my little video, which I'll upload, that the word Vav, or that we used up here, or Vav, we'll just go with Vav, is the Hebrew word for hook. And it's used in the Tanakh, in the Torah, when it's talking about the Almighty instructed Moshe to make silver hooks for the curtains of the tabernacle to hold it, the curtain panels together. So it fits really well with that. And we can kind of see that in the shape of the letter. Here we have it in the way that it is written today. It's a simple vertical line with the little hook at the top. And despite its simplicity, Vav is one of the most important letters in biblical Hebrew. Our Torah scroll at synagogue is of a family way of writing it that took a lot of thought and planning, because every column in our Torah scroll begins with the letter Vav, and the family that come up with that system wanted to show that the Torah is one continuous work. It's all connected. And they did that by making letters longer, shorter, and bigger and whatever, so that they could put a vav at the beginning of every column of the first word in the column. As I said, it's a simple downward stroke, little hook on the top. Simple, but very important. One of the simplest letters to make in the Hebrew alphabet. The only one that I could think would be simpler would be the Yud, and we'll look at that next lesson. Grammatical functions of the Vav. As I said, it serves as a conjunction, and this is its most common use. It's usually translated as and. Vai David and David. Va David and David. This is one of the most common words in the entire Hebrew Bible. David gets talked about a lot. The letter Vav is probably the most common letter. I would have to verify that, so don't hold me to that. But it has a flexible translation. Depending on the context, Vav may also mean and, but, then, so, yet, now, therefore. So we can see one little letter has so much power, and context determines the meaning. For example, in the creation story, let's see, let me remember this. When he said, let light exist, we see in most English translations, and light existed, or light came to be, and light was. But in the creation story, the Vav is in a form, most generally, not always, but most generally, it's in what I discussed, or what I mentioned earlier about the Wa consecutive, or the Vav consecutive. This happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. And translators just said, this happened, and then, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. But we see this in the blessing that we do every Shabbat, Vayahi ben Soha Aaron. And it came to pass. We could translate that just as easily and accurately, maybe even more accurately, as then when the ark moved forward, because he's continuing on with the thought there. Good translation requires grammar and context rather than theological bias. This is where exegesis and eisegesis butt heads a lot on this little letter in the Hebrew alphabet. Vav also serves as a vowel carrier, and as such was a mater lectionis. If you put the little dagesh inside of the Vav, you get the Shurik. And we talked about that in the lessons on the vowel mark, the Nikudot. You get the U sound. Then you get the Cholam Maleh, where the dagesh is above the Vav, and you get the long O sound. O. These are extremely common in biblical Hebrew. And then the Vav consecutive is, as I said, it can change the tense of the verb from a present tense or a fulfilled to a future tense. Traditional grammar calls this the Vav consecutive or Vav conversive, and a very common word of this is Vayahi. In the account of creation, again, the very common phrase for each day, Vayahi Erev, Vayahi Boker. Then it became evening, then it became morning. This construction is extremely common in narrative Hebrew. And hopefully you won't panic if this seems confusing at first. It with use, it becomes commonplace for you. And because it's used so much in the Hebrew Tanakh, you catch on quickly. And even advanced Hebrew students continue studying these patterns. Why is it used here? And why is it not used here? I got into a discussion with a Jewish rabbi online one time about the Vayahi being then it became. And he argued with me, and I said, well, I was talking about the creation, and he was saying, no, I said, well, what about then it came to be when the ark moved forward? He said, well, that's two different words. They're spelled different. They have different vowels. And so I pulled it up for him, and he looked at it and he goes, oh, because they are spelled exactly the same vowels and everything. So connection and continuity is the main thought in Jewish thinking with the letter Vav. It's joining, continuation, like we said in the creation, a progression of events. It's used in other places in the same way. Linkage, the hook in the tabernacle of the panels of the curtains, and covenant connection, even vayikra, and he called, or then he called, speaking about the Almighty calling out to us in the covenant in the book of, as we know it, Leviticus. Some Jewish commentators also connect Vav symbolically with the six directions of space. And when they do this, I think I saw something one time where a person took the letter Vav and made a Magen David, the 6 days of creation. Day one, then day two, then day three, then day four, and on. The idea of structure and completion, the curtains of the tabernacle completed the structure. Again, these are interpretive traditions rather than strict linguistic facts. But I think they give us some insight into the deeper meanings in the Torah. The numerical value is 6, and traditional associations again are structure, completeness, and creation order. The conjunction the and, or the and then so forth. The kav is a line. We tie a line between two things to connect them. We tie a line around things to bundle them together. And then the word vav itself, a hook or a peg. So vav joins ideas together. The Hebrew narrative often flows through repeated vav constructions. So vav reminds us that biblical thinking is relational. Ideas connect, people connect, covenants connect, generations. And scripture itself is highly connected